Some nights change everything. For Tiwa Collins, that night was a rainy Tuesday in Atlanta when she came home from a brutal 12-hour shift at Grady Memorial Hospital's trauma unit and found a man bleeding out in her driveway. She didn't know who he was. Didn't know he was Hyunbin Taeho, heir to the Taeho conglomerate that owned half of Seoul's skyline and a significant portion of its economy. Didn't know he was worth approximately $18 billion. Didn't know he'd just survived an assassination attempt orchestrated by his own cousin. All she knew was, bleeding man, her driveway, her medical training kicking in faster than her fear. So she did what trauma nurses do, she stopped the bleeding, stabilized his vitals, and saved his life. Then everything got complicated. But let me start at the beginning, because this story isn't what you think it's about. Tiwa Collins was 32 years old, originally from Lagos, Nigeria, relocated to Atlanta at 19 on a nursing scholarship. She'd spent 13 years working her way up from student nurse to senior trauma specialist at one of the busiest emergency departments in the American South. She'd seen gunshot wounds, stab wounds, car accidents, domestic violence injuries, every variation of human trauma that a major city could produce. She was brilliant at her job. Fast, efficient, unflappable under pressure. Could assess injuries in seconds, prioritize treatment, make life or death decisions without hesitation. Her colleagues called her the machine because she never panicked, never froze, never let emotion compromise her medical judgment. Outside the hospital, she lived quietly. Small house in a middle-class Atlanta neighborhood, modest car, simple life. She sent money back to Nigeria to support her mother and younger siblings. Volunteered at free clinics on her rare days off. Dated occasionally but nothing serious, her schedule didn't allow for serious relationships, and frankly, after years of watching relationships fail under the pressure of medical careers, she'd decided solo was safer. She was content. Not happy exactly, but stable. Functional. Surviving in a profession that burned out most people within 5 years. Then Hyunbin Taeho collapsed in her driveway at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and stable became a memory. Hyunbin was 35 years old, eldest son of the Taeho family that had built a business empire spanning construction, technology, manufacturing, real estate, and finance across South Korea and increasingly throughout Asia. The kind of wealth that made him invisible to normal economic concerns, private jets, multiple residences across continents, art collections worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. But wealth attracted violence. Always had. His cousin Miho, younger by 2 years, equally ambitious but lacking the family's approval for succession, had apparently decided that if he couldn't inherit the empire through birthright, he'd claim it through murder. Had hired professionals to make it look like a robbery gone wrong during Hyunbin's business trip to Atlanta. The professionals had failed. Partially. They'd shot him, twice, center mass, intended to be fatal. But Hyunbin had been wearing a ballistic vest under his custom suit. Paranoia about kidnapping attempts was useful sometimes, so the bullets had cracked ribs and caused internal bleeding but hadn't penetrated vital organs. He'd fought back, killed one attacker, injured the other badly enough that they'd fled. Then he'd staggered away from the scene, leaving his security detail dead, knowing that whoever wanted him dead would send backup. Knowing he needed to disappear until he understood the full scope of the conspiracy. He'd walked, stumbled, really, through Atlanta's streets, bleeding internally, ribs broken, trying to stay conscious long enough to reach, somewhere. Anywhere that wasn't where assassins expected him to be. And he'd collapsed in Tiwa Collins's driveway because geography and blood loss had made that decision for him. Tiwa came home at 11:45 p.m., exhausted from a shift that had included 3 gunshot victims, a car accident with multiple casualties, and a domestic violence case that had made her want to scream. All she wanted was a shower, some leftover jollof rice, and 8 hours of unconsciousness. Instead, she found a man face down on her concrete driveway, blood pooling beneath him, rain mixing with the blood to create pink rivers running toward the street. Her exhaustion evaporated. Training took over. She parked fast, grabbed her medical bag from the trunk, trauma nurses learned to keep supplies on hand, and was kneeling beside the man within seconds. Pulse, weak but present. Breathing, shallow, labored. Blood, significant amount, still flowing, source unclear. She rolled him over carefully, assessing for spinal injury while checking for obvious wounds. And found herself looking at the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Even bleeding and unconscious, he was stunning. Sharp features, dark hair plastered to his forehead by rain, expensive suit soaked through. The kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens. Also, 2 bullet wounds, center mass, vest visible beneath the torn suit jacket. This wasn't an accident or a mugging. This was attempted murder. Tiwa's hands moved automatically. Pressure on the wounds, the vest had stopped penetration but the kinetic energy had caused internal trauma. Check for exit wounds. None, bullets trapped in the vest. Assess breathing, labored, possible pneumothorax from broken ribs. She needed to get him inside. Needed better light, her first aid supplies, a way to assess the full extent of his injuries. "Sir," she said loudly, checking his pupils with her phone's flashlight. "Can you hear me? I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." His eyes fluttered open, dark, unfocused, clearly in shock. He said something in Korean, words she didn't understand. "English?" she asked. "Do you speak English?" "Help," he managed, the word heavily accented but clear. "Please. They tried to kill me." "I can see that." "Who tried to kill you?" Don't know. Can't trust anyone." His eyes rolled back. He was losing consciousness again. Tiwa made a decision that would change her life. She didn't call 911. Didn't call the police. Because if this man was running from professional killers, involving authorities might get him killed. Might get her killed too. Instead, she got him into her house. It took all her strength. He was tall, solid muscle under that suit, deadweight in his unconscious state. She half-dragged, half-carried him through her garage into her kitchen, leaving a trail of blood and rainwater across her clean floors. She cleared her kitchen table, laid him out, cut away his suit jacket and shirt to access the injuries properly. And revealed a body covered in scars. Old knife wounds, bullet wounds healed over, evidence of a life that had included significant violence long before tonight. But she focused on the immediate injuries, 2 impact points over his ribs, severe bruising already forming, blood seeping from the edges where the kinetic energy had broken skin despite the vest. She palpated carefully, at least 3 ribs broken on the left side, possibly more. Breathing was wrong, definitely pneumothorax, collapsed lung from the rib trauma. He needed a hospital. Needed a trauma surgeon, chest tubes, possibly emergency surgery. But he'd said he couldn't trust anyone. And Tiwa had learned in Lagos, long before she came to America, that sometimes the official channels were more dangerous than the immediate threat. So she made another decision. She'd treat him here. Use her trauma training, her supplies, her skills to stabilize him. Then figure out what to do next. She worked for 2 hours straight. Cleaned the wounds, addressed the pneumothorax using a modified needle decompression technique she'd only done under supervision. Wrapped his ribs, administered antibiotics from her medical supplies, started in 4 for fluids and pain medication. By 2 a.m., his vitals were stabilized. He was sleeping, real sleep, not unconsciousness. Breathing easier. Color returning to his face. Tiwa sat in her kitchen chair, covered in his blood, surrounded by medical debris, and thought. What the hell have I just done? She'd brought a stranger into her home. A stranger who'd been shot, who'd said people were trying to kill him, who was clearly running from something dangerous. She'd violated probably a dozen protocols, maybe broken laws about reporting gunshot wounds. And she had no idea who he was or what she'd just gotten involved in. But she'd saved his life. She knew that absolutely. Another hour and he'd have died from internal bleeding and respiratory failure. So she cleaned up the medical debris, mopped the blood from her floors, moved him to her guest room where he could recover more comfortably. And when he woke up the next morning, looked at her with those dark eyes now fully conscious and said, "Thank you for saving my life," in careful English, Tiwa Collins had no idea she'd just saved one of the richest men in Asia. She just knew she'd saved someone who needed saving. Everything else would come later. Subscribe to see how a trauma nurse's split-second decision to save a stranger's life becomes the beginning of something neither of them expected. Comment below where you're watching from, and tell me, would you bring a bleeding stranger into your home to save their life? This story is just getting started. Hyunbin woke up in an unfamiliar room with sunlight streaming through cheap curtains and no idea where he was. Memory returned in fragments. The ambush, the shooting, running through Atlanta streets, collapsing somewhere, a woman's voice speaking calmly while her hands worked with professional efficiency. He tried to sit up. Pain exploded through his ribs and he gasped, falling back against pillows that smelled like detergent and something floral. Don't move. The voice from last night, calm, authoritative, with an accent he couldn't quite place. You have 3 broken ribs, possibly 4, and I had to decompress your lung. You move too fast and you'll undo my work. Hyunbin turned his head carefully. The woman standing in the doorway was beautiful in a way he hadn't registered last night through the blood loss and shock. Dark skin, natural hair pulled back in a bun, wearing scrubs that suggested she'd just come from work or was heading there. Tall, maybe 5'9", with the kind of athletic build that came from functional strength rather than gym aesthetics. Her eyes were what stopped him. Brown, intelligent, assessing him the way doctors assess patients, clinical detachment mixed with genuine concern. Where am I? He asked, his English rusty from lack of recent use. My house. Guest bedroom. You collapsed in my driveway last night around midnight. She stayed in the doorway, maintaining professional distance. I'm Tiwa Collins. I'm a trauma nurse at Grady Memorial. I found you bleeding out, stabilized you, brought you inside. You didn't call the police. You said people were trying to kill you. I figured involving authorities might not be in your best interest. Or mine if they decided to come finish the job. Smart. Hyunbin appreciated intelligence. Thank you, he said carefully. For saving my life. For not calling the police. For. He gestured vaguely at his bandaged torso. All of this. You're welcome. Now I need to know who you are and what I've gotten involved in. Tiwa crossed her arms. Because I violated about a dozen reporting requirements by not documenting a gunshot wound. If this comes back on me, I could lose my nursing license. So talk. Fair. She deserved answers. My name is Hyunbin Taeho. I'm from Seoul, South Korea. My family owns the Taeho conglomerate. Construction, technology, manufacturing, real estate. He watched her face for recognition, found none. We're one of the largest business groups in Asia. Never heard of you. Most Americans haven't. We don't operate much in the US market. He shifted slightly, winced at the rib pain. I was in Atlanta for business meetings. Last night, someone ambushed my security detail, killed my guards, tried to kill me. I fought back, escaped, got as far as your driveway before collapsing. Who tried to kill you? I don't know for certain. But I suspect my cousin Miho. He wants control of the company, has been making moves to undermine me for years. Assassination is a logical escalation. Tiwa processed this information with the same calm she probably brought to trauma assessments. So I saved the life of a Korean billionaire being targeted by family assassination plots. Perfect. Exactly what my quiet Tuesday needed. But there was dry humor in her voice, not panic. What's your plan now? I need to contact people I trust in Seoul. Figure out the scope of the conspiracy. Determine who I can trust and who might be compromised. Hyunbin tried sitting up again, managed it this time despite the pain. But first I need to recover enough to function. And I need somewhere safe to stay while I do. You're asking to stay here. I'm asking for a few days to heal and plan. I'll pay you, obviously. Whatever you consider fair compensation for the risk and inconvenience. Tiwa laughed, a short, sharp sound. You think I want your money? I saved your life because I'm a nurse and you were bleeding in my driveway. Not because I expected payment. I know. But you're taking a risk keeping me here. You deserve compensation for that risk. What I deserve is honesty. Are there people actively looking for you right now? Armed people? Professional killers? Probably. But they don't know where I am. I ditched my phone, my security detail is dead, I deliberately went in the opposite direction from my hotel. Unless someone followed me, which I don't think they did, nobody knows I'm here. You don't think they did? That's not reassuring. It's the best I can offer. Hyunbin met her eyes directly. I understand if you want me to leave. I can try to make it to somewhere else. But I'm asking for help. A few days to recover, to plan, to figure out next steps. After that, I'll disappear and you'll never hear from me again. Tiwa was quiet for a long moment, clearly calculating risks and options. 3 days, she said finally. You can stay 3 days. After that, you find somewhere else. And while you're here, you follow my medical instructions exactly. No moving around unnecessarily, no ignoring pain signals, no doing stupid things that undo my work. Agreed. And you tell me the truth. About everything. Who you are, who's after you, what the risks are. I don't like surprises, especially not dangerous ones. I'll tell you everything I know. Good. Tiwa glanced at her watch. I have to leave for my shift in 20 minutes. There's food in the kitchen, easy stuff, nothing that requires much effort. Plenty of water, pain medication on the nightstand with dosage instructions. Don't answer the door, don't use any phones, don't do anything that might alert people to your presence here. I understand. And Hyunbin? If you're lying to me about any of this, if it turns out you're more dangerous than the people chasing you, I will not hesitate to call the police and let you deal with the consequences. Clear? Completely clear. Tiwa nodded once, then left for her shift. Hyunbin lay back against the pillows, processing what had just happened. He'd been saved by a trauma nurse who had no idea who he was, who'd treated him with professional efficiency and demanded honesty instead of payment. In his world, the world of inherited wealth and corporate power plays, everyone wanted something. Everyone calculated angles, sought advantages, performed kindness with expectations of return. But Tiwa Collins had saved his life because he was bleeding in her driveway. Had demanded truth instead of money. Treated him like a person instead of an opportunity. It was refreshing. Disorienting. Completely outside his normal experience. He needed to contact people in Seoul. Needed to activate contingency plans, secure his position, neutralize the threat. But right now, he needed to rest. Let his body heal. Trust that this stranger who'd saved his life would keep saving it for a few more days. Tiwa's shift was brutal. 2 car accidents, a gang shooting, a construction accident that required her to literally hold a man's severed artery closed while the trauma surgeon prepped for emergency surgery. By hour 9, she was running on coffee and professional autopilot. But her mind kept returning to the man in her guest bedroom. Hyunbin Taeho. Korean billionaire. Assassination target. Currently sleeping in sheets she'd bought from Target on clearance. She'd looked him up during her lunch break. The Taeho conglomerate was real, massive presence in South Korea, expansion throughout Asia, estimated value in the tens of billions. Hyunbin's photo appeared in dozens of business articles, always wearing expensive suits, always looking composed and powerful. Nothing like the bleeding, desperate man who'd collapsed in her driveway. The articles mentioned his cousin too. Miho Taeho, described as ambitious, currently managing the company's expansion into Southeast Asian markets. The family succession was apparently contested, tradition favored Hyunbin as eldest son, but there were factions supporting Miho as more aggressive and modern in his business approach. Corporate warfare that had apparently escalated to actual warfare. Tiwa finished her shift at midnight, drove home in exhausted silence, and found Hyunbin awake in her living room despite her instructions to rest. You're supposed to be in bed, she said, dropping her bag on the couch. I was bored. And I needed to move around before the ribs healed in the wrong position. He was wearing clothes she didn't recognize, must have been in his luggage that she'd found in her garage, apparently dropped there before he collapsed. Simple pants and shirt that somehow still looked expensive. How was your shift? Long bloody. The usual. Tiwa headed to her kitchen, Hyunbin following despite the obvious pain it caused. You shouldn't be walking around this much. I've had broken ribs before. I know my limits. Have you had a partially collapsed lung before? Twice, actually. Tiwa stopped, turned to look at him. What kind of life have you lived where you've had a collapsed lung twice? The kind where being wealthy makes you a target. Kidnapping attempts, corporate espionage that turned violent, family disputes that got physical. Hyunbin leaned against the kitchen counter carefully. My father believes that heirs should be able to defend themselves physically, not just through lawyers and security teams. He had me trained in combat, survival skills, threat assessment from age 10. That's child abuse. That's pragmatic parenting when you're worth billions and have enemies who'd happily ransom or kill your children. But Hyunbin smiled slightly. Though you're not wrong. It was brutal training. My childhood wasn't exactly normal. Tiwa pulled out leftover jollof rice, started heating it. Must be lonely. Never knowing if people like you for yourself or for your money. It is. Though money also creates a buffer that makes loneliness comfortable. Private spaces, carefully curated social circles, the ability to avoid genuine connection if it feels too risky. He watched her work. What about you? Your accent isn't American. Nigerian. Lagos originally. Came here at 19 for nursing school. Tiwa plated the rice, sat at her kitchen table. She didn't offer him any, he shouldn't be eating heavy food yet with his injuries. Been in Atlanta for 13 years. Work, send money home to family, try not to burn out from the trauma unit's brutality. That's my life. Also lonely. Also comfortable. She ate quickly, efficiently, the way nurses learn to eat during brief breaks. Why were you in Atlanta? Business meetings with CDC officials. The Tejo conglomerate has a pharmaceutical division developing vaccines for emerging diseases. We were negotiating collaboration agreements. So you're not just rich. You're rich and doing something potentially useful. Potentially. If the business negotiations didn't bore me to death first. Hyunbin shifted, winced. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you save me? You could have called 911, let professionals handle it, avoided all the risk and legal complications. Why bring me into your home? Tiwa set down her fork, considering the question. When I was 23, I was mugged in Lagos before I moved here. Got stabbed, bleeding badly, and a stranger, this old woman who sold fruit on the street, she grabbed me, dragged me into her house, stopped the bleeding, saved my life. She didn't know me, didn't have medical training, just knew I needed help. She met Hyunbin's eyes. When she was done, I asked her why she'd risked helping me. She said, because you were bleeding in front of me. I couldn't just let you die. That stayed with me. When I found you in my driveway, I thought about her. About how she'd saved me without question, without calculation. So I did the same. You saved me because someone once saved you. I saved you because you were bleeding in front of me and I couldn't just let you die. Everything else is details. Hyunbin looked at her with something like wonder. You're remarkable. I'm a trauma nurse who's seen too much death to be comfortable letting preventable deaths happen. That's not remarkable. That's basic humanity. In my experience, basic humanity is actually quite rare. They sat in comfortable silence. Tiwa finished her food, cleaned up the dishes, tried to ignore how her guest bedroom's presence had shifted the entire dynamic of her home. I need to make some calls tomorrow, Hyunbin said eventually. Secure phone, encrypted communication. I need to contact my people in Seoul, start organizing my response to this situation. What kind of response? The kind that identifies who ordered my assassination and ensures they can't try again. Corporate warfare, legal action, possibly criminal charges if I can prove Miho's involvement. He met her eyes. This isn't going to be quiet or subtle. Once I activate my defenses, people will know I'm alive. That might bring danger here. Then you need to leave before that happens. I know. But I needed you to understand what you're potentially facing by helping me. This isn't just about me recovering from gunshot wounds. This is about me preparing for actual war with someone who has billions of dollars and no moral boundaries. Tewa processed this. How long before that war starts? Once I make contact with Seoul? 48 hours before Miho realizes I survived. Another 24 before he traces my location through whatever digital breadcrumbs I'll inevitably leave. So 3 days maximum before potential danger arrives here. Then you have 2 days to recover and leave. Same timeline I already gave you. And if I'm not fully recovered in 2 days? Then you leave anyway and finish recovering somewhere else with professional security. I saved your life, Hyunbin. I'm not interested in dying to protect it. Fair. He stood carefully, obviously still in significant pain. Thank you, Tewa. For saving me, for being honest, for giving me a chance to recover. I won't forget this kindness. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through the next 2 days without killers showing up. Optimistic. Realistic. I'm a trauma nurse, remember? I've seen too many things go wrong to believe in smooth recoveries. Hyunbin smiled. Genuine warmth that transformed his entire face from intimidating businessman to something more human. Then I'll try not to make your pessimism justified. He went back to the guest room. Tewa stayed in the kitchen, staring at the spot where a bleeding stranger had become something more complicated. She should have called 911. Should have followed protocols, maintained professional distance, avoided getting involved in international corporate assassination plots. But that old woman in Lagos hadn't followed protocols when she'd saved Tewa's life. Sometimes basic humanity required breaking rules. Tewa just hoped that decision wouldn't get them both killed. Day 2 brought complications neither of them expected. Tewa woke up to find Hyunbin in her kitchen making breakfast, or trying to, at least, while obviously struggling with the pain from his injuries. You should not be cooking, she said, taking over before he burned her eggs. I wanted to do something useful. You saved my life, fed me, gave me a place to recover. Cooking breakfast seemed like inadequate repayment but better than nothing. You're recovering from gunshot trauma and a partially collapsed lung. You don't owe me breakfast. Tewa plated the eggs properly, made toast, set everything on the table. Sit. Eat. Stop trying to be useful and focus on healing. They ate in companionable silence. Somewhere over the past 2 days, the stranger dynamic had shifted into something almost comfortable. I need to make those calls today, Hyunbin said eventually. Contact Seoul, start the process of securing my position and identifying the conspiracy. You have the equipment for that? In my luggage. Encrypted satellite phone, secure laptop, connections to people I trust absolutely. He paused. Once I make contact, things will move quickly. Miho will realize I survived. The board will need to be briefed. Legal and security teams will mobilize. It becomes very public very fast. And dangerous. Potentially. Which is why I'll leave immediately after making contact. I won't put you at more risk than I already have. Tewa appreciated that, even as part of her felt oddly reluctant about him leaving. Which was stupid. He was a stranger, a billionaire from a different world, someone whose presence had already complicated her life significantly. She should want him gone. But she'd spent 2 days watching him recover, treating his injuries, having actual conversations about life and loneliness and the strange weight of carrying responsibility you never asked for. She'd seen him not as a billionaire or a corporate heir, but as a person trying to survive attempted murder while maintaining dignity. She liked him. Despite every practical reason not to, she genuinely liked Hyunbin Taeho. Make your calls, she said. I'll be at the hospital until late tonight. By the time I get back, you should be gone. Leave the keys under the mat, text me from a secure number when you're safe so I know the killers didn't catch up with you. You want me gone today. I want you safe. Those aren't the same thing, but functionally they require the same action. Tewa stood, gathering her things for her shift. Good luck with your corporate war. Try not to get killed after I spent 2 days keeping you alive. I'll do my best. She left for work, trying to ignore the strange hollowness in her chest. Hyunbin waited until noon before making the calls. He set up his secure equipment in Tiwa's guest bedroom, activated encryption protocols that made his communications virtually untraceable, and contacted the one person he trusted absolutely, his head of security, Park Ji-woo. Ji-woo answered on the first ring. "Sir? We thought you were dead. The ambush in Atlanta. I survived. 2 gunshot wounds, ballistic vest saved me. What's the situation in Seoul?" "Complete chaos. Miho announced your death this morning, made a play for emergency succession, claimed you died in a random robbery in Atlanta. The board is split, some demanding proof of death, some willing to proceed with Miho's succession." Of course he did. Hyunbin felt cold rage settle in his chest. "And my father? Refusing to believe you're dead without a body. Demanding investigation." "But he's isolated, Hyunbin. Miho has been building alliances for months. Half the board supports him, the other half is afraid to oppose him. Then we need proof of life. Immediately. Can you set up a secure video connection to the board? Give me 30 minutes. While Ji-woo worked, Hyunbin made other calls. His legal team, his financial advisors, the few family members he trusted. Building the case against Miho, documenting the assassination attempt, preparing for the corporate battle that would consume the next months. The video connection went live at 1:15 p.m. The Taeho Corporation Board of Directors appeared on screen, 15 powerful executives managing a multi-billion-dollar empire. Most looked shocked to see Hyunbin alive. A few looked relieved. 2 looked disappointed. Those 2 were in Miho's pocket, clearly. "Gentlemen," Hyunbin said calmly, despite the pain radiating through his ribs. "As you can see, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I survived the assassination attempt in Atlanta, sustained injuries but recovered, and am now returning to Seoul to resume my position." Chaos erupted. Everyone talking over each other, demanding explanations, accusing Miho, defending him, asking for proof. Hyunbin let them talk for 30 seconds, then spoke with the authority that came from being raised to command. "Enough. Here are the facts. I was ambushed in Atlanta by professional killers who murdered my security detail and shot me twice. The attack was coordinated, well-funded, and intended to look like random violence. Someone within our organization provided detailed information about my schedule, my security protocols, my location." He pulled up evidence on screen. Ballistic reports from the vest that had saved his life, autopsy reports on his dead security team, surveillance footage showing the sophisticated nature of the attack. This was not random. This was planned assassination designed to create a succession crisis. I have suspicions about who ordered it, but I won't make accusations without proof. What I will say is this. I'm alive, I'm recovering, and I will be returning to Seoul within 48 hours to personally oversee the investigation into who tried to kill me. He paused, letting that sink in. Anyone involved in this conspiracy should understand, I will find you. I will expose you. And I will ensure you face consequences for trying to murder me and succeeding in murdering my security team. No mercy. No forgiveness. Absolute consequences. The board members looked shaken. Miho wasn't on the call. Probably scrambling to adjust his plans now that his cousin had inconveniently survived. "Mr. Chairman," Hyunbin addressed his father's closest ally. "I need you to lock down all corporate decisions until I return. No major changes, no succession planning, nothing that allows this crisis to be exploited. Can you do that?" "Yes. The board will support you, Hyunbin. Welcome back from the dead." The call ended. Hyunbin sat back, exhausted from the effort of projecting strength while his ribs screamed protest. He'd done it. Announced his survival, disrupted Miho's succession plan, bought himself time to return and consolidate power. But he'd also painted a massive target on himself. Miho would know Hyunbin was alive now. Would know he needed to finish what the Atlanta assassins had started. Which meant staying in Tiwa's house was no longer safe for either of them. Hyunbin packed his minimal belongings, erased all evidence of his presence, left an envelope with $50,000 cash as inadequate compensation for the risk Tiwa had taken. Then he called Jiwoo to arrange extraction. I need secure transport from Atlanta to Seoul. Private jet, no flight records, complete security. Can you arrange that? Already done. Jet will be ready at a private airfield in 3 hours. I'm sending a security team to extract you now. Where are you? Hyunbin hesitated. Giving Tiwa's address meant exposing her location to his organization. But refusing meant walking through Atlanta alone while professionally injured and potentially targeted. He compromised, gave an address 3 blocks away, said he'd meet the security team there. Then he wrote a note to Tiwa. Thank you for saving my life and giving me time to recover. I've left compensation that doesn't begin to match the value of your kindness, but please accept it anyway. You were right. I needed to leave today. The corporate war starts now, and it won't be safe for you if I stay. I won't forget what you did for me. If you ever need anything at all, contact me through the number below. I pay my debts, and I owe you my life. Stay safe. And thank you for reminding me that basic humanity still exists. Hyunbin. He left the note on her kitchen table with his private contact information, gathered his things, and walked out of the house that had sheltered him for 2 days. He made it half a block before the SUV pulled up and 4 men got out, weapons drawn. Not his security team. The wrong make of vehicle, the wrong approach pattern. Miho's people. Somehow they'd found him. Hyunbin's training kicked in despite the broken ribs and healing lung. He assessed threats, calculated options, prepared to fight with significant disadvantages. Then a car screeched to a stop behind the SUV. Tiwa's beat-up Honda. She'd apparently come home early from her shift. And she was getting out of her car, walking toward the armed men with absolute fearlessness. What the hell do you think you're doing in my neighborhood? She demanded, her voice carrying the authority she used with unruly patience. The men looked confused. This wasn't part of their plan, random civilian woman interrupting their assassination. Ma'am, get back in your car, one of them said. This doesn't concern you. That man is bleeding from broken ribs, has a partially collapsed lung, and is under my medical care. Anything involving him absolutely concerns me. Tiwa positioned herself between Hyunbin and the armed men. You want him, you go through me first. Hyunbin felt something crack open in his chest. She was protecting him. This trauma nurse who barely knew him was standing between him and professional killers because she'd decided he was her patient. Tiwa, get out of here, he said urgently. These men are dangerous. I'm a trauma nurse in Atlanta. I deal with dangerous every damn day. She didn't move. Now you gentlemen have 3 seconds to get back in your vehicle and leave before I call the police and report armed men threatening a civilian in broad daylight. The men hesitated. They'd been sent to kill Hyunbin quietly, not deal with witnesses and police attention. Then sirens sounded in the distance. Tiwa had apparently already called 911 before getting out of her car. The men retreated, got back in their SUV, drove away fast. Tiwa turned to Hyunbin, grabbed his arm, dragged him toward her car despite his protests about her safety. Get in. We're getting out of here before they decide to come back with more people. Tiwa, you shouldn't. Shut up and get in the car. You're injured, you're being hunted, and you're clearly terrible at operational security. So get in the damn car and let me save your life again. Hyunbin got in the car. Tiwa drove like she was fleeing a war zone, fast, aggressive, taking random turns to lose any potential pursuit. She didn't speak until they were 15 minutes away, parked in a hospital employee lot where her car wouldn't be suspicious. Then she turned to him, fury and fear mixing in her expression. What the hell was that? You said you'd leave, you'd be safe, nobody would trace you here. Then I come home early and find armed men hunting you in my neighborhood? I don't know how they found me. I was careful, I used encrypted communications. Clearly not careful enough. Tiwa's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. They could have killed you. Could have killed me. Could have killed my neighbors. This is exactly the danger you said wouldn't happen. I know. I'm sorry. I thought I had more time before Miho traced my location. Hyunbin reached out, stopped before touching her. Tiwa, I'm sorry. You were right to want me gone. I'll call my actual security team now, get proper extraction, make sure this doesn't come back to you. Too late for that. They saw me. Saw my car. Probably got my license plate. If they want to track me down, they can. Hyunbin felt cold dread. He'd put her in danger. This woman who'd saved his life was now targeted because of him. I'll protect you, he said. Whatever it takes, I'll make sure you're safe. Security detail, relocation if necessary, whatever you need. I don't want your protection. I want my quiet life back. But Tiwa's voice was shaking. I save lives, Hyunbin. I don't get involved in assassination plots and corporate warfare. I just wanted to help someone bleeding in my driveway, not get dragged into international crime. I know. And I'm sorry. But we're here now, and we need to deal with it. He pulled out his encrypted phone. Let me call my actual security team. Get you somewhere safe. Then I'll leave for Seoul and end this war as quickly as possible. Tiwa was quiet for a long moment. I have a shift tonight. Real patients who need me. I can't just disappear because some Korean billionaire's family drama spilled into my life. Then I'll have security watch you. Discreet, professional, keeping you safe while you work. Just until I neutralize the threat. For how long? However long it takes to expose Miho's conspiracy and ensure he can't send more killers. That could be weeks. Months. I know. But I won't let you be collateral damage in my family's war. Hyunbin met her eyes directly. You saved my life, Tiwa. Twice now, apparently. I pay my debts. And keeping you safe is the only way I can even begin to repay what you've done for me. Tiwa laughed, bitter, exhausted. I should have called 911 that first night. Should have let the ambulance take you, the police investigate, stayed completely uninvolved. But you didn't. You brought me into your home, treated my injuries, gave me time to recover. That kindness has consequences. I'm sorry, they're dangerous consequences. Me too. But Tiwa started her car. Make your calls. Get your security team here. And Hyunbin? This doesn't make us friends. This makes you someone I'm stuck protecting because I made a choice that turned out to be more complicated than I expected. Understood. But as Hyunbin made the calls to bring professional security to guard Tiwa, as he arranged his extraction to Seoul, as he prepared for the corporate war that would define the next months of his life, he couldn't stop thinking about a trauma nurse who'd stood between him and armed killers without hesitation. Who'd saved his life not once but twice because she couldn't let someone die in front of her. Who'd dragged him into her car and driven away from danger while simultaneously being furious at him for creating that danger. She was remarkable. Brave, competent, absolutely unwilling to abandon someone she'd decided to protect. And he'd put her in danger. That needed to be fixed. Immediately. Jiwoo arrived with proper security within 90 minutes, a 6-person team, professional, heavily armed, equipped to handle serious threats. They secured Tiwa's house, swept for surveillance devices, established protection protocols that would keep her safe while maintaining her normal routine. Tiwa hated all of it. I don't need armed guards at the hospital, she protested. My patients are traumatized enough without seeing tactical teams in the hallways. The guards will be discreet, Jiwoo assured her. Plain clothes, concealed weapons, maintaining distance unless threats emerge. You won't notice them. I absolutely will notice them. I notice everything in my workplace. Then notice them and feel safer knowing they're preventing assassination attempts. Tiwa looked at Hyunbin. This is insane. I'm a nurse. I shouldn't need security teams. You shouldn't. But you're a nurse who saved a man being hunted by people with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. That creates risks we need to mitigate. Hyunbin was already preparing to leave. His actual extraction team waiting, private jet fueled, Seoul calling him home to the corporate war. I'll end this as quickly as possible. Expose Miho, neutralize the threat, make sure nobody has reason to target you. And if you can't? If this corporate warfare drags on for months? Then you'll have security for months. It's not ideal, but it's better than being unprotected and vulnerable. Jiwoo handed Tiwa a phone. Encrypted, secure, direct line to our operations center. Any threats, any concerns, you call immediately. We respond within minutes. Tiwa took the phone like it might explode. Hyunbin moved to leave, paused at the door. Thank you, Tiwa. For everything. For saving me, for protecting me, for being the kind of person who chooses humanity over self-preservation. I won't forget it. Just go end your war. And Hyunbin? Don't get killed after all the effort I put into keeping you alive. I'll do my best. He left. Tiwa watched through her window as SUVs drove away carrying a man she'd found bleeding in her driveway 3 days ago. Then she looked at the security team still in her house, at the encrypted phone, at the reality of her quiet life being completely upended by one decision to save a stranger. This is temporary, she told herself. Just until he fixes his family drama. Then everything goes back to normal. But she didn't believe it. And over the next 6 weeks, as Hyunbin fought his corporate war in Seoul while she worked her trauma shifts with discreet security teams following her everywhere, Tiwa realized normal was gone. Her life had changed the moment she'd brought that bleeding stranger into her home. The question was whether that change would destroy her or transform her into something different. Seoul became a battlefield. Hyunbin returned to Korea and immediately began the systematic destruction of Miho's conspiracy. Forensic accounting exposed financial manipulation, surveillance uncovered bribes, legal teams filed charges for attempted murder and corporate fraud. It was brutal, exhausting, and absolutely necessary. But it took time. Miho had built his conspiracy carefully over years. Unraveling it required proving every connection, documenting every crime, building a case that would survive both corporate and criminal prosecution. Weeks became months. The board split into factions. Some executives resigned. Others fought viciously to maintain their positions and protect Miho. Through it all, Hyunbin maintained regular contact with Tiwa. Video calls late at night Seoul time, early morning Atlanta time. Updates on the investigation, questions about her safety, conversations that gradually shifted from purely security-focused to genuinely personal. You look exhausted, Tiwa said during one call, her own exhaustion visible after a brutal trauma shift. Corporate warfare is surprisingly tiring. Who knew destroying your cousin's conspiracy required so many legal briefs? But Hyunbin smiled. How are you holding up? Still hate having security teams. Still appreciate not being shot. So mixed feelings, overall. She sipped coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. When does this end, Hyunbin? When do I get my life back? Soon. We're close to proving Miho's direct involvement. Once we have that, criminal charges proceed, he's removed from the company, threat neutralizes. You've been saying soon for 6 weeks. I know. I'm sorry. This is taking longer than I expected. And costing him more than he'd anticipated. The corporate warfare was consuming everything. His time, his energy, his relationships. He barely saw his father, barely maintained friendships, had no life beyond the investigation. Much like Tiwa's life had been consumed by security protocols and the constant awareness that she was protected because she'd saved a stranger. I miss my anonymity, she said quietly. Miss being just another trauma nurse. Now I'm that woman being protected by Korean security teams and everyone speculates about what I'm involved in. I'll fix this. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. But he wanted to keep this promise. Wanted to give Tiwa back the quiet life she'd sacrificed to save him. Except part of him didn't want her to go back to that quiet life. Part of him wanted to keep having these late-night conversations, keep seeing her face on video calls, keep knowing that somewhere in the world was a woman who'd stood between him and killers because she'd decided he was worth protecting. He was falling for her. Despite the distance, despite the circumstances, despite every practical reason it was a terrible idea. He was falling for Tiwa Collins. In Atlanta, Tiwa was having the same realization. She looked forward to Hyunbin's calls. Missed him when schedules didn't align. Caught herself thinking about him during trauma cases, wondering if he was safe, hoping the corporate war hadn't gotten him killed. It was ridiculous. They'd spent 3 days together, most of which he'd been injured and she'd been working. They came from completely different worlds. He was a Korean billionaire heir, she was a Nigerian nurse in Atlanta. Nothing about this made sense. But when her phone buzzed with his contact information, her heart jumped. When his face appeared on screen, she smiled despite her exhaustion. When they talked about nothing, just life, stress, the absurdity of their situations. She felt less alone than she'd felt in years. I think I'm falling for him, she told her friend Keisha during a rare coffee break. Which is insane, right? I barely know him. You saved his life twice, he's protecting you from assassins, you talk every night for hours. You know him better than people who've dated for months. Keisha stirred her coffee. The question isn't whether you're falling for him. The question is what you're going to do about it. Nothing. He's in Seoul fighting corporate wars. I'm in Atlanta working trauma. Geography alone makes this impossible. Geography hasn't stopped you from talking every night. Talking isn't a relationship. No, but it's the foundation of one. If you both wanted it to be. Tiwa thought about that. Did she want a relationship with Hyunbin? With all the complications that would entail, cultural differences, wealth gaps, the simple reality that their lives existed in completely different orbits? Maybe. Which was terrifying and exciting and completely impractical. The breakthrough came 3 months after the assassination attempt. Hyunbin's legal team uncovered direct financial transfers from Miho to the killers in Atlanta. Not hidden through layers of shell companies, but actual traceable payments that proved conspiracy to commit murder. It was the smoking gun they needed. Miho was arrested. Charged with attempted murder, corporate fraud, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The Taeho Corporation board voted unanimously to remove him from all positions and support Hyunbin's full ascension to leadership. The war was over. Hyunbin called Tiwa the night it ended. It's done, he said, unable to keep the exhaustion and relief from his voice. Miho's in custody, charges filed, threat neutralized. You're safe. You can dismiss the security team, go back to your normal life. Silence on the other end. Tiwa? I heard you. That's good. I'm glad it's over. But she didn't sound glad. She sounded sad. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm just tired. Long shift. A pause. So that's it? Security leaves, we go back to our separate lives, this all becomes a weird story I tell at parties? It doesn't have to be. What do you mean? Hyunbin took a breath, made a decision. I'm coming to Atlanta. Not for business, not for investigations. To see you. To have an actual conversation face to face about what this has become. What has this become? I don't know. But I know I think about you constantly. Know that talking to you is the best part of my day even when my day involves corporate warfare. Know that I'm falling for you and I need to know if you feel the same or if I've been reading this completely wrong. Another pause. Longer this time. You're not reading it wrong, Tiwa said finally. I've been falling for you too. Which is crazy because we've spent exactly 3 days together and the rest has been phone calls and security teams and me wondering if you were getting killed in Korea while I was treating gunshot wounds in Atlanta. So let me come to Atlanta. Let me take you to dinner, have actual in-person time, see if this thing between us is real or just the product of extreme circumstances. And if it's real? Then we figure out how to make it work. I don't know how yet. Geography, cultural differences, lifestyle gaps all seem insurmountable. But I want to try. If you do. Tiwa laughed softly. I saved your life because you were bleeding in my driveway. Now you're asking me on a date. This is the weirdest progression I've ever experienced. Is that a yes? That's a come to Atlanta and we'll see. I'm not making promises. But I'm willing to explore what this is. That's all I'm asking for. Hyunbin arrived in Atlanta 3 days later. Not with security teams or corporate entourages. Just him, flying commercial, showing up at Tiwa's door with flowers and a kind of nervous energy he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. Tiwa opened the door in jeans and a simple shirt, her natural hair down, looking nothing like the composed nurse or the exhausted trauma specialist he'd seen on video calls. She looked beautiful. Relaxed. Real. "Hi," he said, suddenly awkward. "I brought flowers. I don't know if that's appropriate or cliché or..." "It's sweet." Tiwa took the flowers, invited him inside. "Welcome back to the house where you almost died. Much better circumstances this time." They went to dinner. Not somewhere expensive or flashy, Tiwa chose a Nigerian restaurant that reminded her of home, where the food was excellent and the atmosphere was warm. They talked about everything. His corporate victory, her work at the hospital, the absurdity of how they'd met, the long months of security teams and phone calls and gradually falling for each other across continents. "I still can't believe you stood between me and those killers," Hyunbin said over jollof rice. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed." "Probably both." "I wasn't thinking strategically. I was thinking. This is my patient, these men are threatening him, I'm not letting that happen." Tiwa smiled. "Turns out trauma nursing makes you fearless in really specific situations. It makes you remarkable. It makes me someone who's seen too much death to be comfortable with preventable deaths." "That's not remarkable, that's trauma response." "I disagree. But I'm not going to argue with a woman who saved my life twice." After dinner, they walked through Atlanta's streets, talking easily, the 3 months of phone conversations having built a foundation that made in-person time feel natural rather than awkward. "So what happens now?" Tiwa asked as they stood outside her house. "You go back to Seoul, I stay in Atlanta, we keep having phone calls?" "If that's what you want. But I was hoping for something more." "Like what?" "Like trying to build something real. I know the geography is complicated. I know our lives are in different countries. But I have resources, I can visit frequently, you could visit Seoul, we could figure out a way to make this work if we both want it. I barely know you. You know me better than anyone has in years. You've seen me bleeding, vulnerable, scared. You've seen me fight corporate wars and deal with family betrayal. You know who I am when everything is stripped away." Hyunbin took her hands. "And I know you. Know your compassion, your strength, your inability to let people die in front of you even when it's risky. Know you're brilliant, brave, and absolutely unwilling to compromise your principles for anyone. That's a lot of knowing for 3 days and 3 months of phone calls. It's enough to know I want more. Want actual time together. Want to see if this thing between us can become something lasting." He paused. "What do you want?" Tiwa was quiet, considering. What did she want? The safe answer was, send him back to Korea, maintain the phone calls, keep this as a long-distance connection that didn't disrupt her life. But the honest answer was different. "I want to try," she said. "Want to see if a trauma nurse from Nigeria and a Korean billionaire can actually build something real. Want to believe that saving someone's life can become the beginning of something beyond just medical intervention. So we try? We try. But slowly. Visit each other, learn each other, see if this works outside of extreme circumstances and phone calls. No pressure, no expectations beyond honest effort. I can do that." Hyunbin kissed her then, gentle, tentative, their first actual kiss happening on the same driveway where he'd collapsed bleeding 3 months ago. It felt right. Natural. Like the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started with blood and salvation and gradually become something neither of them had expected. "Thank you," Hyunbin said when they broke apart. "For saving my life. For giving me a chance. For being exactly who you are. Thank you for surviving. For ending your war. For being willing to try something complicated instead of settling for something easy." They went inside. Not to resume anything dramatic, just to sit in Tiwa's living room and talk more, build on the foundation they'd been creating for months. And over the next year, they did try. Hyunbin visited Atlanta monthly. Tiwa visited Seoul twice, experiencing his world, the wealth, the corporate responsibility, the cultural differences that made her both uncomfortable and curious. It wasn't always easy. They fought about schedules, about cultural expectations, about the simple reality that their lives existed in different orbits. But they kept trying because what they'd built mattered more than the complications. 18 months after Tiwa had found a bleeding stranger in her driveway, Hyunbin Taeho asked her to marry him. Not with grand gestures or public proposals. Just the two of them in her Atlanta kitchen, where he'd once tried to make breakfast while recovering from gunshot wounds, where she'd fed him and protected him and gradually fallen for him. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because it's practical or because it solves geography or because our families expect it. Marry me because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tiwa looked at the ring, beautiful, expensive, completely over the top in ways that made her both want to laugh and cry. "Yes," she said. "But I'm keeping my job at Grady. I'm not becoming some corporate wife who gives up her career for her husband's empire. I would never ask you to. Your work is part of who you are. I love all of who you are. And we split time between Seoul and Atlanta. I'm not leaving my life behind, but I'm willing to share yours. Deal. Anything else?" "Yeah. No more getting shot. I saved your life twice. 3 times feels excessive." Hyunbin laughed, pulled her close. "I'll do my best to avoid situations requiring medical intervention. That's all I ask." They married 6 months later in a ceremony that blended Korean and Nigerian traditions, that celebrated two cultures coming together, that proved love could transcend geography and circumstance when both people chose it. Tiwa kept working at Grady, kept being the trauma nurse who saved lives because she couldn't stand to let people die in front of her. Hyunbin ran the Taeho Corporation with the same determination that had survived assassination and corporate warfare, transforming the company into something more ethical and sustainable. Together, they built a life that spanned continents, that honored both their worlds, that proved a trauma nurse finding a bleeding stranger in her driveway could become the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes the most significant relationships begin with split-second decisions to help someone in crisis. Not because you expect anything in return. Not because you calculate the benefits. But because someone needs help and you have the capacity to provide it. Tiwa Collins saved Hyunbin Taeho's life because she was a nurse and he was bleeding in her driveway. That simple act of compassion, choosing humanity over self-preservation, choosing to help despite the risks, became the foundation for something neither of them anticipated. They proved that love can transcend cultural boundaries, geographic distance, and wealth disparities when both people choose honesty, effort, and genuine connection. That trauma nurses and billionaire heirs can find common ground in shared values, courage, integrity, the refusal to abandon people they've decided to protect. Most importantly, they demonstrated that basic humanity. The choice to save a life without knowing who that person is or what they can offer, creates bonds stronger than any transaction or calculation. If you loved this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections and the transformative power of compassion. Comment below, would you bring a bleeding stranger into your home to save their life? Or have you ever had a simple act of kindness change your entire life trajectory? Let me know. I love hearing your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most extraordinary relationships often begin with ordinary acts of human decency. Never underestimate the power of helping someone when they need it most. Until next time.